they will do the opposite of the awliya of shaitan. But the awliya of Satan, they are very, very real. And the war is really between them and, I wish we could say, us, the awliya of Allah. That's where the battle takes place. So they will present themselves in all kinds of different ways. And the false shaykh, we need to talk about him a little bit. And you ask questions about that. But the false shaykh, at his worst, is definitely one of the awliya of shaitan. And he's one of the biggest ones of all. He's one of the waylayers of the believers on the highest path there is. Okay, so we talked then about the fraudulent shaykh. And we mentioned there the dangers of the fraudulent shaykh. And we mentioned there also the dangers of the false teacher, false scholar, the abusive scholar, the one who doesn't practice what he preaches. He tells you all these great things, but he doesn't do it himself. He's maybe a munafiq, and if he is, may God cure him, but he's a big problem. And the trauma that comes from him is second to the trauma that comes from the false shaykh. And then you have the false or hypocritical Quran reciter. So we talked about that. But what are the signs of the false shaykh? So yesterday we talked about that in the questions and answers, and I don't want to repeat that. But one of the questions that came up is, are there different types of them, false shaykhs? So this has to be answered. And in fact, this would apply to everything else. It would apply to the scholar, and it would apply also to the Quran reciter. And this is very important because we do have to acknowledge that they also have different degrees. Some of them are horrific. Some of them are absolutely horrific. And they are awliya shaitan. And some of them are not so bad, but they're not the real thing. So they have different degrees. Just like if we look at scholars, some of them can be really hypocritical and really contradict in their behavior everything they talk about. But then there's some that are not that bad, but they're not that good either. So you have different degrees. And with Quran reciters, it would be like that as well. So this is also very important, that they have different degrees. And they're not all the same. Now, nevertheless, the path is to come to God. And in coming to God, the path is to become real. And it means also to become 100% you. Because you came into this world, not a pauper. You came into this world a rich person with an inheritance that only God knows the reality of. You are the daughter of Adam. You are the son of Adam. So you want to be 100%. And one of the greatest purposes of the Shaykh is to make you 100%. So this cannot happen if he is not 100%. So we want the Shaykh who is 100%. And again, we want to beware of the false Shaykh, especially the ones that belong to the awliya of shaitan. But then, even if we look at others who we don't really know quite where to place them, but red flags are there, and there are other problems there, then there you want to look for the one who's 100%. And if the Shaykh is 30%, you're not going to be more than 30%. So he may not be false. And among the Shaykhs who are not the real thing are the ones who taught themselves, the ones who also break their trust. And we hope to talk about this at some time, that we have this thing called silsila, the chain of transmission, which is extremely important. And alhamdulillah, we as Qadiris have an amazing silsila going back to Al-Hasan al-Basri. And we have another one going back to Imam al-Hasan himself, and Imam Ali. But that silsila is of no value if I cut it. Okay? And if I cut it, I hope I wouldn't be a false pretender. But nevertheless, I'm not 100% at all. And probably I will crash. And you see this happen to many sheikhs. They crash. They crash. Sometimes they never really had a silsila. But sometimes they cut their silsila they had. And how do we do that? Well, we do that, first of all, by not honoring its principles, by betraying it. Because the silsila is khidmah and mahabba and adab. That's what it's all about. So what if I use the silsila to be makhdum, and to be beloved, but not really to love? So I cut the silsila. I have betrayed it. So the silsila doesn't empower you if you don't take its power. And this would be another place where Satan is there to get you to make a very ugly truce. Right? Like, why don't we just make you such and such? And you're actually not. So you have to be true to the silsila. And then there's another way that we can cut the silsila as well. Well, I mean, I and most of you, or many of you, are followers of Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. I love him with a love which is insane. Truly, I love him, I love him, I love him. Do I love the other awliya also? What about As-Suhrawardi? What about Al-Rifa'i? What about Al-Dasuqi? What about Al-Badawi? What about Al-Shadhili? What about Ibn Ata'illah al-Sakandari? What about Al-Imam al-Haddad and the Ba'alawis? Because we have lots of turuq and we have lots of sheikhs. So you must love them also. And if you begin to disparage them, even in your heart, you're gnawing away at your own silsila. And if, God forbid, we should disparage them publicly, you cut your silsila. Man adali waliyan faqad adhantuhu bil harb. Whoever offends one of my awliya, God says, I have declared war against. So you don't want to do that. And again, the child naturally and necessarily loves his or her father. And we boys like to boast about our fathers. And you might even go to someone else and say, my father's better than you, your father. And in my country we even say, my father could beat up your father. And your father said, would you stop saying that, please? What do you want to do? Get me in trouble? Okay? But, the murid often will do this about his shaykh. That my shaykh is the best of them all. My shaykh is better than your shaykh. And also, they often will want to compare awrad and to compare ahzab. You should never do that. Because, first of all, you don't know what they mean. You don't know what stages they represent. You need to begin at the beginning. All these awrad are of no use to you. If you just open the book, you need to be worked up to that state. And then, the greatest danger of all is that you will then say that this path is better than that path. They're different. But, you must be very careful. And the same thing about the silsila. In fact, there are sheikhs who won't tell you their silsila because of the great danger that you will compare it to others. Or that you will meet with others who are on the path and they will say, this is our silsila, where is yours? And then you begin to compare, and in that you're putting the axe to the tree. This is childish. This is dangerous also. And of course, even in these families with the great ansab, especially Ahlul Bayt, God bless them. I know of many of them, and especially Jilanis like this. And I've known many Jilanis like this. They won't tell their children the nasab. I know of one who's very close to me, and he's now passed on years ago. Big Jilani Shaykh. And he wouldn't tell his children their nasab. And they would say, please, tell us the nasab. And he said, what? He said, so you can't marry so-and-so, and you can't marry so-and-so? He said, I want you to be able to marry everybody. And I want you to be open to everyone. And, so he wouldn't show it to them. But in any case, it's very, very important to learn these fine points and to live by them. Then we have another question that came up. And in fact, this is the first question that my beloved brother and his wife gave us tonight based on your questions. And we try to come to these, tonight before the time is up. What is the cure? What is the cure? And I'm just going to give you some propositions. But when you are traumatized by a false shaykh, what is the cure? And many of us are, brothers and sisters. In fact, one of the ironies of the path is that for some people, and sometimes they're some of the greatest of the awliya, they begin their path with a false shaykh. And that becomes the first and biggest test. And it could destroy them forever. But because they are able to escape and to stay alive and to keep their himmah and their goal, they will find then the real shaykh. Okay, and the Sufis write about that. They write about that. And they write about Sufis that begin with a false shaykh. But then and they serve him and they love him and they don't know. But then when they discover, they're devastated. Okay, but then that opens the door to the real one. So that's why if you have had a false shaykh or a questionable shaykh, don't regard that to be a death knell, because it might in fact indicate that you are one of the very best. You will get there, insha'Allah. But of course, the greatest cure of all is to find a true shaykh. To find a true shaykh. And the true shaykh can cure this trauma forever. And in fact, if you have been traumatized by a false shaykh, that's what he will do. He will begin by getting you whole again. It might take 3 years. It might take more, it might take less. It depends a lot on you, how long the trauma went on, how deep the trauma was. So that would be the cure of cure. That's like the panacea. But what if you can't find such a shaykh? So and what if it takes you time to find such a shaykh? And there you want to find the best company you can find and keep it. And you want to look for the believers, the ones you believe in, the ones you can trust, the ones who are not going to use you and abuse you and misuse you, and keep their company. And they're a healing, they're a therapy as well. Don't fixate on that experience. Don't fixate on that false shaykh. Just leave him. Now you may have to warn people about him, but don't fixate on him. And don't try to destroy him. If you can pray for him, that would be beautiful. You may not be able to do that because he hurt you bad, and often he hurt other people as well. And that might be the thing that makes it really difficult for you to forgive and forget. But you want to move on. You don't want to remain attached to him, even in the negative sense of remembering how horrible he was and how horrible he may continue to be. Because often they continue to destroy people right and left. And it can be extremely discouraging. But don't fixate on him, and don't try to destroy him. and just set out to find the path, set out to find the real thing. Now, having said that, you also want to make lots of salat on the Prophet, because when you can't find a shaykh, salat on the Prophet is one of the secrets that gets you there. And when you're in a situation like this, salat on the Prophet is one of the remedies that helps you to find the company that you so desperately need, and maybe, and hopefully, to find the real thing. Now, one of the greatest problems with those who are traumatized on the path, however, is that they can never trust again. And this is where the trauma is really serious. And God bless them and cure them. And I know people like this who lived and died like this, that they loved him, they gave him everything, and he betrayed them totally. And they probably didn't even know themselves. In this case, the one I'm thinking of, he remained a Muslim, and a good one. And he worked very hard, but he was never 100% ever. In fact, I don't believe he was even 30%. In it, he could never be. And he saw, after that, at least half a dozen real sheikhs. But he couldn't take the hand of any of them. He loved them, he visited them, he asked for their dua, but he could not submit to them. He could not trust them. And one of the rules of the path, one of the qawa'id of the path, is that if you don't submit to someone in particular who deserves that, who's worthy of that, meaning a real shaykh, no one will benefit from you, and you won't benefit from anyone. This is one of the qawa'id of the path, that in order for me to benefit from others, I need to be in submission to my master. Of course, I have to find my master. And what a blessing when you do. God, you can thank. You're just filled with thankfulness for the rest of your life. I've got him. I've got him. And he will never let you down. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. But, the problem is that the person who's been burned and burned bad, they may never trust again. I know two cases in mind, in fact. And one of them, he could never take the hand of a shaykh, even though, wallahi, he loved and met half a dozen. But he couldn't do that. In the end, he took the hand of a false shaykh, of a bigger fraud than the first one. Isn't that strange? But then isn't that a pattern? That people who are abused end up getting abused again, psychologically probably, because they want to bring closure to that. They think that this time I'll do it right, or this time it won't happen, and it does happen again. And in fact, in his case, he took the hand of a false sheikh. I was so sad. And I was angry with him, in fact. Because I said, I said in my heart, you never took the hands of these real ones. We offered them to you. And then you take the hands of this fool. I'm talking to myself. And then he died. He didn't last with that sheikh very long. I think the sheikh gave him adhkar that killed him, actually. Because the sheikh knew nothing. He was a fraud, a big fraud. And, so he died. And I was told by another sheikh that he died as a mercy to God. And that he died as a shaheed. But that he fell back into it, because this fraud that he fell for had the same psychic energy of the first fraud. The first fraud was a lot bigger and a lot better. But That same psychic energy was there, and he fell for it. And God just took his life. But he could have been so much. And he did so much. But he never was more than 30%. And I know another case of a man who, again, was traumatized. And this is one of the most beautiful people I've ever known. And he's one of the greatest I've ever known. Great scholar, great energy. But again, he could never take the hand of a sheikh after that. Even though he will say, so-and-so is my sheikh, so-and-so is my sheikh, so-and-so is my sheikh. But I know they weren't. Because I know him, and he never submitted to them. And he took people as sheikhs also who are beautiful people, but they're not sheikhs. And, so again, it's like he could just never trust again. And there are many people like that, brothers and sisters. May God guide them and have mercy on them. So this is a very important topic. It's a very dark, an unhappy topic. We don't like to talk about it, but we have to. And, I think that's enough said about that. And may God protect us, and may He protect those people, and may He bring the children home. Because actually out there are hundreds, let's say thousands, of people who are either under a false sheikh and they don't know it, but they're not going anywhere, or they've been under one and they just can't break through. So, inshallah, may God bring the children home, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Again, the true sheikh, he can put it all back together again. He can put it all back together again, and we pray for such true sheikhs that can set things right and bring things back to where they ought to be.